What if, on the worst night of a raging storm, a struggling single dad had to decide whether to open his door to a complete stranger, someone who might change everything he thought he knew about trust, family, and second chances? What if that stranger was running from a past so big it could shatter the quiet life he's trying to protect? And what if the kindness of one small act could rewrite the story of all their lives? The Oregon woods roar with the fury of a late autumn storm, the kind that turned the sky to iron and the trees to thrashing specters. Rain lashed against the weathered cabin, its tin roof drumming a relentless tattoo. Inside, Ben Carver hunched over a steaming mug of coffee, his calloused hands wrapped around the chipped ceramic, listening to the wind howl like a grieving thing. His 7-year-old daughter, Leah, sat cross-legged on the floor, her nose buried in a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web, her small voice murmuring the words as if they could tame the chaos outside. Ben's eyes flicked to the window, where the world was a blur of gray and green, and he felt the familiar weight of solitude settle deeper into his bones. He wasn't always alone. Once, there had been Sarah, Leah's mother, his anchor, whose laughter used to fill this cabin. But 3 years ago, a slick road and a tired trucker had stolen her, leaving Ben to stitch together a life for Leah from the scraps of his grief. He was a handyman, fixing what others broke, but some things, like the ache in his chest, defied repair. Tonight, though, something else demanded his attention. Headlights cutting through the deluge, stuttering to a stop in his muddy driveway. Ben stood, his broad shoulders tense, and peered through the rain-streaked window. A battered camper van, its paint peeling like old skin, sat crookedly at the edge of his property. The engine coughed once, then died. A figure emerged, cloaked in a drenched hoodie, struggling against the wind. Ben's first instinct was to lock the door. Strangers in these parts were rare and rarely safe. But Leah looked up, her hazel eyes wide. "Daddy, someone's out there. They look cold." He sighed, rubbing the stubble on his jaw. "Stay here, Bug. I'll check it out." The porch light flickered as Ben stepped outside, the storm swallowing his voice as he shouted, "Hey, you okay?" The figure turned, a woman, her face half hidden by the hood, her frame shivering under sodden clothes. She raised a hand, not in greeting but surrender. "Van broke down," she called, her voice nearly lost to the wind. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass. I just need somewhere to wait out the storm." Ben squinted, his gut twisting. She didn't look dangerous, but looks could lie. Still, the rain was biblical, and Leah was watching from the window, her small face pressed against the glass. He couldn't turn someone away, not tonight. "Come up to the porch," he said gruffly. "It's enclosed. You can stay there till this passes." She nodded, grabbing a backpack from a van, before trudging toward him. Up close, her face was pale, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks, but her eyes, sharp green and guarded, held a story she wasn't telling. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm ally." "Ben," he replied, keeping his distance. "Stay on the porch. I'll get you a blanket." Inside, Leah was already rummaging through the linen closet. "She needs a towel too, Daddy. And maybe hot chocolate." Ben shushed her gently, but his daughter's heart was too big for caution. By the time he returned to the porch with a quilt and a towel, Ally was sitting on the wicker chair, dripping onto the wood floor. She accepted the items with a murmured thanks, her fingers trembling as she wrapped the quilt around herself. "Don't get any ideas about coming inside," Ben said, his tone harder than he meant. "I've got a kid to look after." Ally's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just passing through." Ben nodded, unconvinced, and retreated to the cabin. Leah was waiting, her questions piling up like firewood. Why is she out there alone? Is she lost? Can she have dinner with us? "No," Ben said firmly. "She's a stranger, Leah. We don't know her." "But she's wet," Leah protested, her voice rising. "What if she's nice?" Ben knelt, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Sometimes people aren't what they seem, Bug. We help, but we stay careful." "Okay." Leah pouted but nodded, and Ben felt a pang of guilt. He wanted her to believe in kindness, but the world had taught him to trust sparingly. The storm didn't relent by morning. If anything, it grew angrier, the wind rattling the cabin's bones. Ben found Ally still on the porch, curled under the quilt, her breath visible in the chilly air. She looked smaller, almost fragile, but her eyes were alert when they met his. "Van still dead?" he asked, handing her a mug of coffee. She nodded, taking the mug with both hands. "Won't start. I tried everything I know, which isn't much." Ben grunted. He was a mechanic by trade, but he'd fixed enough engines to know his way around. "I'll take a look later. You got somewhere to go when this clears." Ally hesitated, her gaze drifting to the rain. Somewhere, nowhere urgent. Her vagueness set his nerves on edge, but he let it slide. "Stay on the porch. I'll check the van when the rain eases." By noon, the storm had softened to a drizzle, and Ben ventured out to the camper. It was a relic, an old Airstream, its aluminum dented and rusted. The engine was a mess of frayed wires and leaked oil, but nothing he couldn't handle with time and parts. Ally watched from the porch, her expression unreadable, as he poked around under the hood. "Needs a new alternator," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "And the battery's shot. I can fix it, but it'll take a few days to get parts out here." Ally's shoulders sagged, but she nodded. "How much?" Ben eyed her, noting the frayed backpack, the scuffed boots. She didn't look like she had much. "We'll figure it out. For now, stay put." That evening, Leia slipped onto the porch with a plate of macaroni and cheese, ignoring Ben's protests. "You gotta eat," she said, thrusting the plate at Ally. "It's my favorite." Ally blinked, then smiled, a real one, soft and unguarded. "Thanks, kid. I'm starving." Ben watched from the doorway, his arms crossed. Leia's chatter filled the silence, and Ally listened, her laughter surprising him with its warmth. For a moment, the cabin felt less empty. Days blurred into a week, the storm lingering like an unwelcome guest. Ben worked on the camper when he could, driving into town for parts, while Ally stayed on the porch, reading Leia's books or sketching, in a battered notebook. She didn't talk much, but her presence grew familiar, like a shadow you stopped noticing. Leia, of course, was smitten, trailing Ally with questions about her drawings, her travels, her life. Ally answered carefully, her stories vague but vivid, tales of cities that never slept, of markets bright with color, of oceans that whispered secrets. Ben listened from a distance, torn between curiosity and suspicion. One night, as Leia slept, Ben found Ally on the porch, staring at the stars through a gap in clouds. He sat across from her, a beer in hand, and broke the silence. "You running from something?" Ally stiffened, her fingers tightening around her pencil. "What makes you think that?" "You're out here, middle of nowhere, in a van that's more rust than road. People like that usually got a reason." She met his gaze, her eyes sharp again. "Maybe I just like the quiet." Ben snorted. "Quiet's one thing. Hiding's another." Ally looked away, her jaw tight. Not everyone's got a story worth telling, Ben. He let it go, but the question hung between them. "What are you afraid of?" The camper was nearly fixed when the first twist came. Ben was in town, picking up a fuel pump, when he overheard a couple at the diner, their voices low but urgent. "They're saying it's her, that fashion lady, the one who tanked her company, spotted out by Carver's place." Ben froze, his coffee halfway to his lips. Fashion lady? He thought Ally's guarded eyes, her city stories, the way she flinched at sudden noises. Back at the cabin, he didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, he watched her closer, noting the way she avoided mirrors, the way her hands shook when a car passed too slowly on the road. That night, Leia begged Ally to read her a bedtime story. Ally chose the Velveteen Rabbit, her voice soft and steady, and Ben stood in the doorway, his heart twisting. Leia fell asleep with her head on Ally's lap, and for a moment, Ally's face softened, her guard down. Ben almost spoke, almost asked, but something stopped him. He wasn't ready to break the fragile peace. The next morning, Ally offered to help with the camper, handing him tools as he worked. Her hands were steady now, her movements precise, like someone used control. "You're good at this," she said, watching him rewire the ignition. Fixing things. Comes with the job, Ben said, glancing at her. You ever fix anything? She laughed, a bitter edge to it. I used to think so. Turns out I was better at breaking things. He wanted to push, to ask what she meant, but Leia ran out, waving a drawing of a camper under a rainbow. This is for you, Ally. So you remember us when you go. Ally's smile faltered, and Ben saw it. The crack in her armor. I won't forget, she said softly, tucking the drawing into her notebook. The second twist came on a quiet Sunday, when the storm finally broke, leaving the woods dripping and alive. Ben was testing the camper's engine when a black SUV rolled into the driveway, its tinted windows gleaming. Ally froze, her face draining of color. Ben, she whispered, don't let them in. Before he could respond, a man in a crisp suit stepped out, a camera dangling from his neck. Alexa Morrow, he called, his voice slick with confidence. We've been looking for you. Ben's stomach dropped. Alexa Morrow. The name hit like a stone. He'd seen it on tabloids in town. The billionaire fashion mogul whose empire had collapsed in a storm of lawsuits, betrayal, and scandal. Embezzlement, they'd said. A lover's betrayal. A public fall. Ally Alexa backed away, her eyes wild. I'm not her, she said, but her voice shook. The man smirked, snapping photos. Sure, sweetheart. Tell that to the world. Ben stepped forward, his fists clenched. Get off my property. The man raised his hands, still grinning. Just doing my job. She's news, man. Big news. Ben shoved him back toward the SUV, his voice low and dangerous. Leave. Now. The man drove off, but the damage was done. Ally sank onto the porch steps, her head in her hands. Ben stood over her, his mind racing. Alexa Morrow, he said, not a question. She looked up, her eyes wet. I don't want you to know. Why? He demanded. What are you doing here, pretending to be someone else? She laughed, a broken sound. Pretending? Ben, this is the first time I felt real in years. The truth unraveled slowly, like a thread pulled from a sweater. Alexa told him everything. How her empire, Morrow Couture, had been her life's work, built from nothing but ambition and grit. How her CFO, her lover, had siphoned millions, framing her for fall. How the media had torn her apart, calling her a fraud, a thief, a failure. She'd fled New York, shedding her name, her wealth, her identity, until she was just Ally, a woman with a broken van and nowhere to go. Ben listened, his anger softening to something heavier. He knew loss, knew betrayal. He'd lost Sarah to a twist of fate. Alexa had lost herself to a world that chewed up dreams. Why stay here, he asked. Why not keep running? She looked at Leia, play in the yard, and her voice broke. Because your daughter reminded me what it's like to be seen. Not as a headline, but as a person. The media descended like vultures. News vans lined the road, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Alexa hid in the cabin, her face pale, while Ben kept them at bay, his shotgun resting by the door. Leia, confused and fierce, clung to Alexa's side, whispering, Don't let them take you away. One night, as the frenzy peaked, Alexa made a choice. She stepped onto the porch, facing the cameras, her chin high. I'm Alexa Morrow, she said, her voice steady, and I'm done running. She told her story, not the tabloid lies, but the truth, the betrayal, the loss, the shame. She announced the dissolution of Morrow Couture, her voice unwavering. I'm starting over, she said, not as a mogul, but as a person, and I'm doing it for the people who showed me what that means. She revealed the Leia Foundation, a non-profit to support single fathers and working families, funded by the last of her wealth. The cameras captured every word, but for once, they didn't define her. A note to readers. If the story has pulled you in, if it's made you feel the way to Ben and Alexa's journey, please like and subscribe to support more tales of resilience and redemption. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. The question, what does it mean to be truly seen? Not as a role, a title, or a headline, but as the raw, flawed, hopeful person beneath? Months later, The woods were quiet again. The camper was gone, sold to fund the foundation. Alexa stayed, not as a guest but as family. She and Ben built a life, not perfect but real. Gardens blooming, books shared, Leia's laughter echoing. The Leia Foundation grew, its first center opening in town, a place for fathers like Ben to find support, community, hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Alexa sat on the porch, Leia curled against her, reading Charlotte's Web. Ben watched from the doorway, his heart full. "You fixed it," he said softly. Alexa looked up confused. "The camper?" He shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. "Us." The storm had passed, but what it left behind was stronger. A family forged not by blood or status, but by the courage to stay, the grace to heal, and the will to build something new from broken pieces.